My mother-in-law destroyed my wedding dress the night before our ceremony and called me trash. My husband didn't defend me, so I walked out and canceled everything, including the family business he was inheriting. That's how I found myself sitting in a Starbucks at 7 a.m. on what was supposed to be my wedding day, still wearing my pajamas and Carter's Yale sweatshirt, staring at a vanilla latte I couldn't drink because my stomach was in knots. The barista, Mia according to her name tag, kept glancing over at me with that mix of curiosity and concern you give to someone who's clearly about to fall apart in public. Maybe it was the dried mascara trails on my cheeks, or how I'd been clutching my phone like a life preserver for the past hour, watching it light up every few minutes with another desperate text from Carter. "I'm sorry," the latest one read. She didn't mean it. "Please just come home so we can talk this through. Everything's ready. 200 people are coming. My dad's business partners flew in from Singapore." I turned my phone face down on the table and took a deep breath. Last night replayed in my head for the 100th time. The horrified gasp that escaped me when I unzipped the garment bag in my hotel room to find my $5,000 Vera Wang wedding dress in shreds. Like someone had taken garden shears to it, the bodice was separated from the skirt. The delicate lace panels torn apart, the beadwork scattered, and there, pinned to what remained of the bodice, was a note in elegant cursive. "Some trash doesn't belong in the Richardson family. Go back to where you came from." I didn't have to guess who did it. Eleanor Richardson had made her feelings about me clear from day one, but this time, I had proof. The hotel's security camera caught her entering my room with a keycard she'd somehow duplicated, carrying something in her Hermes bag. 20 minutes later, she left with a satisfied smile. When I called Carter sobbing, his first question wasn't if I was okay. It was, "Are you sure it was her? Maybe the dress just fell and tore somehow." Even when I sent him the security footage, his response crushed whatever was left of my heart. "Babe, it's just a dress. We can get you another one first thing tomorrow. Bloomingdale's opens at 9. Don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be, okay? My mom's just traditional. She'll come around eventually." Traditional. That's what he called a woman who destroyed a $5,000 dress and left a note calling his fiancée trash. My phone buzzed. "Again, Carter. The florist is here setting up. Where are you?" I blocked his number. Updated. I should probably explain how I went from corporate lawyer to runaway bride with a vendetta. The comments from my previous post are making me realize I skipped some important context. Anyone ever had their future? Mother-in-law destroy something precious while your fiancé defended them instead of you? Is it ever possible to come back from that kind of betrayal? I met Carter Richardson 3 years ago at a charity gala for the Eastwick Foundation in Newport. I was there representing my law firm. We did pro bono work for them. And he was there because, well, Richardsons show up at these things. His family practically built half of Eastwick, and their shipping company, Richardson Maritime, had been operating out of Newport Harbor since 1887. Carter wasn't what I expected from old New England money. He had this genuine laugh that crinkled his eyes, wore slightly scuffed loafers, and seemed uncomfortable when people mentioned his family's wealth. Our conversation that night moved from climate change legislation to our shared obsession with the Great British Bake Off without a single awkward pause. By midnight, we were sharing tiramisu on the terrace, and I was already imagining what our children might look like. His wavy, brown hair, maybe my green eyes. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Providence. My dad fixed air conditioners. My mom taught 3rd grade. I got through Brown University on scholarships and student loans, worked my way through law school at Boston University, and landed at Harper & Wade, where I specialized in corporate law with a focus on nonprofits. Carter seemed impressed rather than put off by my background. "You've accomplished more on your own than I have with every advantage," he told me on our 3rd date. His parents were a different story. The first time I met Eleanor and Howard Richardson at their sprawling estate on Ocean Drive, Eleanor looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her Louboutins. "Providence, you said? Near the college?" Eleanor asked over dinner, voice dripping with fake interest. "No, actually. The neighborhood's called Silver Lake," I answered. "Oh," she replied, setting down her fork. "How diverse." Carter squeezed my hand under the table. I squeezed back, thinking it meant we were in this together. I didn't realize then that this would become our pattern. Eleanor would say something awful, and Carter would offer private comfort but public silence. The comment about my neighborhood was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, Eleanor made sure I knew exactly how she felt about me. I was the wrong kind of lawyer, corporate instead of tax. My clothes were too statement-making. I once wore red to a garden party. My voice was a bit loud for indoor conversation. My family was embarrassingly ordinary. When Carter proposed at Christmas last year, Eleanor cornered me in the kitchen. While I was helping the caterer clean up, "I hope you'll be signing a prenup," she said, swirling her bourbon. "Carter's too trusting for his own good." I wanted to tell her that as a lawyer, I understood the practical value of a prenuptial agreement, and didn't need her thinly veiled accusations of gold digging. Instead, I just smiled and said, "Carter." And I have already discussed it. Which was true. He had brought it up, and I had agreed immediately. What I didn't tell her was that I had also been made trustee of the Eastwick Foundation 2 months earlier. The same foundation that technically owned 51% of Richardson Maritime shares. It was a legal arrangement from the 1950s that most people had forgotten about, including, apparently, the Richardsons. I'd discovered it while doing routine legal work for the foundation, but hadn't mentioned it to Carter yet. I kept telling myself I was waiting for the right time, that it wasn't relevant until he officially took over the company. The wedding planning brought out the worst in Eleanor. She insisted on being included in every decision but hated all my choices. The venue wasn't prestigious enough. The menu was too exotic. We had one Thai-inspired appetizer. My bridal party wasn't balanced. My maid of honor was my college roommate Zoe, who has blue hair and tattoos. Through it all, Carter played mediator. "She means well," he'd say. "This is just how she expresses love." Or, "She's from a different generation." Or my personal favorite, "Just ignore her." I do. But the dress, my dress, that was different. I'd found it at a boutique in Boston, fallen in love with how the lace overlay reminded me of my grandmother's wedding photos. Eleanor had insisted on coming to the final fitting, had stood in the boutique with her lips pursed, offering only, well, it's certainly youthful. The night before the wedding, we followed tradition. Carter stayed at his parents' house. While I checked into the Ocean Cliff Hotel where the ceremony would take place the next day, my bridesmaids had thrown me a small dinner. Nothing wild. Just good food, some wine, and silly marriage advice written on cocktail napkins. They left around 10 p.m., and I decided to try on my dress one more time, just to make sure everything was perfect. That's when I found it destroyed, with Eleanor's hateful note pinned to the remains. Now, as I sat in Starbucks watching the morning sun climb higher, my phone rang with a number I recognized. "Zoe," I answered on the first ring. "Where are you?" she demanded, her voice tight with worry. "I'm at your room and there's just carnage. What happened to your dress? And why is Carter calling me frantically asking if I've seen you?" My voice broke as I told her everything. The dress, the note, the security footage, Carter's reaction. "I can't marry him, Zoe," I whispered. "Not like this." "Hell no, you can't," she agreed fiercely. "Stay where you are. I'm coming to get you." While waiting for Zoe, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been contemplating for months. I sent an email to the Eastwick Foundation board with copies of all the documentation showing their majority ownership of Richardson Maritime, along with my formal recommendation that the board examine current management practices. Technically, I wasn't doing anything wrong. The information was already there. I was just bringing it to light, and as trustee and legal counsel, it was my fiduciary duty to act in the Foundation's best interests. 20 minutes later, Zoe pulled up in her ancient Volvo, looking ready for war in jeans and a nevertheless, she persisted t-shirt instead of her bridesmaid dress. When I climbed in, she handed me a Dunkin' cold brew and a glazed donut. "So," she said, pulling away from the curb, "what's the plan, counselor?" "First, we need to go to the venue," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "I need to tell everyone in person that there won't be a wedding today." Zoe nodded, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "And then?" "And then," I said, taking a deep breath, "I'm going to make sure Eleanor Richardson never hurts anyone else again." When we arrived at Ocean Cliff, the scene was like something from a wedding magazine. White chairs in perfect rows facing the ocean, an arch entwined with white roses and eucalyptus, champagne flutes gleaming on trays. A small army of vendors bustled around, hanging string lights and arranging centerpieces, and there, in the middle of it all, was Carter. Looking handsome and harried in khakis and a button-down, his hair still damp from the shower. When he saw my car, relief washed over his face. He jogged over as I got out, reaching for my hands. "Thank God," he breathed. "I've been going crazy. Where have you been? Why aren't you dressed? The makeup artist has been calling me for hours." I pulled my hands away. "There's not going to be a wedding today, Carter." His face fell. "Is this about the dress?" "Look, I called Saks. They're opening early for us. We can have something delivered here within 2 hours. "It's not about the dress," I said. "It's about your mother destroying something precious to me, calling me trash, and you acting like I should just get over it." Carter ran a hand through his hair. "Livy, please. 200 people are about to show up. My parents have friends coming from all over the world. You can't do this." "Actually, I can," I replied. "And there's something else you should know." I pulled out my phone and showed him the email I'd sent to the Eastwick Foundation board, watched as he scanned it, his face going from confusion to shock to anger. "You knew about this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "All this time?" "I found out 6 months ago," I admitted. "I was going to tell you after the wedding. Once you officially took over from your dad, I thought we were partners, that we'd make Richardson Maritime even better together, but last night showed me exactly where your loyalties lie, and it's not with me. Carter's face hardened. So this is blackmail? Marry you or lose the company? No, I said quietly. This is goodbye. As if on cue, I saw Eleanor's Mercedes pull up, watched her emerge in a pale blue dress and pearls, her face a mask of country club politeness. When she spotted me in jeans and Carter's sweatshirt, her expression soured. What's going on? She demanded, striding over. Why aren't you dressed? The photographer is waiting. Before Carter could speak, I turned to face her directly. The wedding's off, Eleanor. I think you'll find the note you left on my destroyed dress makes for a pretty compelling reason. Her eyes widened slightly before she composed herself. I have no idea what you're talking about. Really? Should we ask the hotel about their security footage? I pulled out my phone and showed her the video. Or maybe we should check your purse for my dress beads. They might still be there, along with your sewing scissors. Her face went white, then red with fury. You ungrateful little... Mother, Carter interrupted, his voice sharp. Is this true? Did you destroy her dress? Eleanor's chin lifted. I did what needed to be done. She's not one of us, Carter. She never will be. I was protecting you, protecting our family legacy. I expected Carter to defend me, to finally stand up to his mother. Instead, he looked torn, his eyes darting between us like he was watching a tennis match with too much at stake. We can discuss this later, he finally said. Right now, we need to figure out what to tell the guests. And that was it. That was all he had to say after. His mother admitted to destroying my wedding dress and calling me trash, not, how could you? Or get out, just, we'll discuss this later. Like it was a minor disagreement about table settings. In that moment, I saw our future with perfect clarity. Years of Eleanor's cruelty, Carter's spineless compromises, and me slowly shrinking. Myself to keep the peace. If I married him, I'd never be an equal. I'd always be the girl from the wrong side of Providence who should be grateful the Richardsons let her in. Tell them whatever you want, I said, turning to leave. I'm done. As I walked away, I heard Eleanor's voice, suddenly panicked. What does she mean about the foundation? Carter? What is she talking about? I didn't turn back to see his response. I didn't need to. The Richardson empire was about to discover that the trash they dismissed had teeth. 2 weeks after the non-wedding, I sat in the Eastwick Foundation boardroom, watching Howard Richardson's face grow increasingly red as the board voted to restructure Richardson Maritime's executive leadership, effective immediately. This is absurd, Howard sputtered. My family built this company. You can't just... Actually, they can, I interjected calmly. The foundation has held majority ownership since your grandfather donated the shares in 1952 for the tax benefits. It's all perfectly legal. The board, comprised mostly of community leaders and business professionals with no connection to the... Richardsons had been shocked to learn about their controlling interest in one of New England's oldest shipping companies. They were even more shocked when I presented documentation of Richardson Maritime's environmental violations, tax avoidance strategies, and labor issues that had been carefully concealed for years. Carter wasn't present for the vote. He'd tried, calling dozens of times in the days after our non-wedding, his messages evolving from angry accusations to desperate pleas to formal apologies. I'd listened to each one, searching for something real, something that indicated he truly understood what had happened. But even his most heartfelt apology focused on how embarrassed he'd been, how difficult it had been to explain to everyone why the bride had disappeared. Not once did he acknowledge what it meant that he'd failed to stand up for me when it mattered. Most Eleanor, on the other hand, had gone from threats to damage control in record time. When the Providence Journal ran a small piece about the canceled Richardson wedding, she told everyone I'd had a nervous breakdown. Too much pressure, poor thing, not used to society events. When that didn't stick, she tried having flowers delivered to my office with apology notes. When those were returned, she showed up in person, only to be escorted out by security. Now, as the board meeting concluded, I gathered my papers and prepared to leave. Howard caught up to me in the hallway, his face flushed with a dangerous combination of humiliation and rage. You won't get away with this, he hissed. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I met his gaze steadily. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Mr. Richardson. That's why I recorded everything Eleanor said to me over the past 3 years, including her admission about the dress. That's why I've documented every attempt at intimidation since then, and that's why the Foundation's next project will be a women's legal defense fund specifically focused on workplace harassment and domestic abuse. His face went slack with shock. I leaned in slightly, keeping my voice low but firm. Eleanor destroyed my dress, but you all showed me exactly who you are. Consider this my thank you note. Updated. Many of you wanted to know what happened with the company afterward. The board didn't fire the Richardsons completely. That would have been too disruptive. Instead, Howard was moved to chairman emeritus, basically retired with a title, and they brought in new leadership. Carter wasn't completely cut out either. but he's now one of several VPs instead of the heir apparent. Have you ever had a moment where you realized your whole future hinged on standing up for yourself? 6 months later, I was back at the Ocean Cliff Hotel, not as a bride, but as the keynote speaker for the Eastwick Foundation's annual gala. The irony wasn't lost on me as I stood at the podium in a red dress that Eleanor would have deemed inappropriate, announcing the foundation's new initiative, a $2 million fund to help women start their own businesses after leaving abusive relationships. Sometimes, I told the rapt audience, the most difficult decisions are the ones that set us free. Walking away from what hurts you isn't weakness. It's the first step toward building something better. My gaze swept across the room, pausing briefly on Carter, who sat at a table near the back. He'd lost weight, and there was a new heaviness around his eyes. We'd spoken only through lawyers since that day, but I'd heard through mutual friends that he was in therapy, learning to set boundaries with his parents. Too little, too late for us, but maybe not for him. Eleanor wasn't present. She'd taken ill when she learned I would be speaking. Howard sat stone-faced beside an empty chair, pointedly not looking in my direction. After the speech, as waiters cleared dessert plates and guests mingled with champagne, I slipped out onto the terrace for some air. The same ocean view that should have witnessed my vows now spread before me, moonlight rippling across the water. I heard footsteps behind me and turned, expecting Zoe or perhaps a foundation board member. It was Carter. "That was a good speech," he said, keeping a respectful distance. "The foundation's doing important work." I nodded. "Thank you." "I've been in therapy," he offered after a moment, "learning why I never stood up to them, why I couldn't be the person you needed." "I'm glad," I said, and meant it. "Everyone deserves the chance to become better. I miss you," he said quietly. "I know I have no right to say that, but it's true." I looked at him, really looked at him, and felt nothing but a gentle sadness for what might have been. "You miss who you thought I was, Carter. Someone who would bend until she broke. That person doesn't exist anymore." He nodded slowly, acceptance in his eyes. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just about the dress or the wedding, but for every time I didn't stand beside you when you needed me." "I know," I said, "but some broken things can't be fixed. Sometimes, they just become something different." As he turned to leave, I called after him. "Carter?" He paused, hope flickering across his face. "Tell your mother I said thank you. She freed me." I stayed on the terrace long after he'd gone, breathing in the salt air and the scent of new beginnings. Tomorrow, I'd start house hunting. A place of my own, with space for all the parts of myself I'd once tried to shrink. Maybe I'd get a dog. Maybe I'd take that sabbatical to work with the legal aid clinic in Providence. Something I'd always wanted to do but had put aside for Carter's plans. The dress was gone, the wedding canceled, the relationship ended. But standing there watching the moon's reflection dance across the waves, I felt more beautifully, authentically whole than I ever had in white lace. Updated. Just to wrap things up, it's been a year since everything happened. I'm now running the foundation's legal division full-time and living in a small house near the water with my rescue dog, Bean. Eleanor still crosses the street when she sees me in town. The Women's Business Fund has already helped 17 people start new lives. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh with the Richardsons, but then I remember that note pinned to my shredded dress. Would you have done anything differently if you were in my shoes?